Michigan, 1979. A quiet town buried under snow, and one terrible secret. One night, a young woman vanished, and the silence that followed lasted for 45 years. Neighbors grew old, detectives retired, and the story became nothing more than a rumor whispered in small-town diners. But time never forgets, it only waits. Then, one ordinary morning decades later, the past came knocking. A single DNA match cracked open a story the town thought was dead, and the man everyone trusted was the one who'd been hiding in plain sight all along. This is not just a case. It's a haunting reminder that evil doesn't disappear, it just learns to act normal. And when justice finally wakes up after 4 decades of silence, it doesn't stay knocked gently. It breaks the door open. Time isn't ever mercy, it's just as evidence. People often say time heals everything, but that's not always true. Time doesn't heal what's hidden in darkness, it only watches and remembers. Every secret that was buried, every unanswered question that was left behind, time keeps them all. It's like a quiet witness that never sleeps, collecting every detail we try to forget. The days turn into years, and people move on thinking the past is gone, but time keeps the truth safe, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. One small piece of evidence, one forgotten memory, one old file opened again, and suddenly, everything comes back to life. Time doesn't forgive or forget. It's patient, it waits, and when the moment comes, it returns not with mercy, but with proof. Guilt ages differently than innocence. The difference between an innocent person and a guilty one isn't always seen on their face. It's felt in the way they carry time. The innocent sleep peacefully, they laugh without thinking twice, and life slowly moves forward for them. But the guilty, they don't really live, they survive. Every day becomes a quiet punishment. Their mind never rests, their heart never feels light. They pretend to smile, they joke, they go to work, but deep inside something is rotting. Every lie they told eats away at them like rust on metal. Every night when the world goes silent, the sound of what they did comes back louder than before. They wake up sweating, replaying moments they wish never happened. Their body may grow older, but their soul grows heavier. The guilt doesn't fade, it spreads, slowly poisoning every piece of peace they try to build. Because a person can hide from everyone but not from their own heart. And no matter how much time passes, guilt never sleeps. It just grows old with them. The monster learns how to mow his lawn. He didn't look like a monster, he looked like everyone else. He mowed his lawn on Sundays, waved to neighbors, helped carry groceries for the old lady next door. Kids passed by his house without fear. People smiled when they saw him, never realizing what kind of darkness stood behind that smile. That's how evil hides, not in shadows, but in plain sight. It learns the habits of good people. It studies how to act normal, how to blend in, how to laugh at the right moments, and soon no one suspects a thing. For decades he lived like this, quietly, calmly, pretending to be just another man trying to live an ordinary life. But beneath that calm face was the memory of what he did. Every time he cut the grass, every time he fixed the fence, he was trying to control something outside because he couldn't control what was inside. That's what guilt does. It makes monsters look normal. It makes darkness wear the mask of routine. When the arrest finally came, the whole town froze. They couldn't believe it. The man who lived among them for years, the one who smiled at barbecues, the one who said good morning, was the one who took someone's life. It's terrifying because it teaches us something no one wants to admit. Monsters don't always look like strangers. Sometimes they look like the people we trust most. The face of evil is often familiar. When the news broke, people didn't scream. They went silent. They looked at the screen, at the mugshot of the man being led away, and their hearts dropped. Because that face wasn't new, it was familiar. It was the same man they'd seen every morning at the gas station, the one who helped coach the Little League team, the one who smiled at the town fair. How could he be the one? That's the part that breaks people the most. Evil doesn't always look like evil. It doesn't always hide behind dark eyes or angry faces. Sometimes it wears kindness like a costume. It laughs with you, shakes your hand, and stands beside you in photos. You trust it because it looks ordinary, harmless, even gentle. But beneath that calm face is something cold. A secret so dark it poisons everything it touches. The town began replaying every memory they had of him. Every conversation, every time he waved, every time he smiled. And suddenly, all those small, forgotten moments felt different, heavier, darker. People started asking themselves, how did we not see it? But that's the truth about evil. It survives by pretending to be safe. Years went by and people built lives beside a man who carried a buried truth. He aged, he blended in, he grew gray, but evil doesn't fade with time. It just learns how to appear gentle. And when the mask finally falls, it doesn't just destroy the monster behind it, it shatters everyone who once believed in him. Because there is nothing more haunting than realizing the face of evil was one you already knew. The evidence never sleeps, only people do. The case went cold because people got tired. Detectives retired, families moved, memories faded. It felt like the story had been sealed forever. Another unsolved mystery lost in the files of time. But what no one realized was that while people stopped searching, the evidence never slept. Those old boxes sitting on dusty shelves still held the truth. The clothes, the photographs, the fingerprints, they waited quietly for someone to listen again. Evidence doesn't age the way people do. It doesn't forget. It doesn't lie. It simply waits in silence, holding on to every trace of the moment the crime happened. Decades later, when new technology came along, those same pieces of evidence came back to life. What once seemed useless, a single hair, a drop of blood, a torn button, became the key to unlocking the whole story. The machine saw what human eyes couldn't. DNA told the truth when everyone else had given up. That's the power of time mixed with truth. Even when the world moves on, the past still speaks. The evidence was patient. It watched as the guilty man built his life, smiled for photos, celebrated holidays, pretending it was all behind him. But in the quiet of those cold files, his secret was waiting, steady, untouched, undefeated. So when they reopened the case, it wasn't luck. It was justice waking up. Because people may rest, they may lose hope. But evidence doesn't. It remembers, it watches, and one day it tells everything. The past doesn't knock, it breaks the door open. It didn't happen slowly, it happened all at once, like lightning striking after years of silence. One moment the town was peaceful, ordinary, quiet. The next, everything they thought they knew was shattered. That's how the past works. It doesn't come politely, it doesn't send warnings, it breaks the door open when it's ready to be heard. For decades, the man thought he was free. He convinced himself that enough time had passed, that no one would ever connect the dots again. But time doesn't erase what really happened. It only hides it, waiting for the perfect moment to return. And when it does, it doesn't whisper. It roars. It started with a simple phone call, an investigator reopening old files, a new DNA test, a fresh look at forgotten evidence. But that small act was like lighting a fuse. Every buried secret began to rise. The case that once felt frozen suddenly had life again. And then came the knock at his door, not from a neighbor, but from detectives holding a warrant. His whole life of pretending ended in seconds. The people who once smiled at him now watched as he was led away. The same street he had walked freely for 45 years became the path of his undoing. That's the thing about the past. It doesn't need an invitation. It will find you no matter how many new lives you build, no matter how many lies you tell yourself. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It arrives when the truth has finally had enough of being buried. And when it comes, it doesn't knock gently. It breaks the door open and drags every hidden thing into the light. You can escape people, not patterns. He moved from one town to another, changed his name, changed his job, even changed the way he spoke. He thought distance could wash away what he'd done, but guilt doesn't live in a location, it lives inside a person. You can escape people, but not the patterns that follow you. Everywhere he went, the same shadows came along, the same fear of being recognized, the same sudden anger, the same restless nights. He tried to live a normal life, to act like the past was gone, but the way he flinched when someone mentioned 1979, the way his hands shook when the police sirens passed, it all betrayed him. A man can run from everyone who knows his story, but he cannot run from the story itself. Over the years, his habits revealed him. He kept things too clean, too organized, as if trying to control what he couldn't undo. He avoided eye contact when people talked about loss. He isolated himself, pretending to prefer peace, but deep down it was fear. The pattern was there, silent, repetitive, impossible to hide. That's the thing about guilt. It doesn't just haunt the mind, it rewires it. The same choices, the same mistakes, the same ways of hiding, they all come back in cycles. It's not the past chasing you, it's your own reflection. He thought moving houses could bury his secret, but he carried it in his heart everywhere he went, because no one truly escapes the pattern that built their darkness until the truth finally catches up. Memory is a weapon when used by the brave. Years had passed, and most people had learned to forget. The case had become just another old story whispered about in half sentences, unfinished, uncomfortable, slowly fading, but not for everyone. Some hearts refuse to forget what the world moves on from. Some souls carry memory like a weapon, not to hurt but to fight for truth. It started with a single retired detective. He couldn't sleep at night knowing that a name was still missing from justice. He went back to those dusty boxes, the faded photos, the witness notes no one had touched in years. Everyone told him to let it go. It's been too long, they said, but he couldn't, because real justice isn't about time, it's about peace, and peace doesn't come until truth is spoken aloud. Then came the family, the victim's sister still holding on to a picture that had yellowed with age. Every year she called the police department just to ask one question: did anyone find anything new? And every year the answer was no, but she never stopped asking. She kept her sister's name alive when the world forgot it. Her memory became the reason the case refused to die. That's the power of remembrance. When it's held by the brave, it becomes stronger than fear. Memory can open doors that evidence alone cannot. It can awaken the hearts of those who once gave up. And when courage and memory join hands, even the coldest case begins to thaw. The truth didn't return by accident. It returned because someone refused to forget. Because even after decades of silence, a single voice saying, "I remember," can shake the ground hard enough for justice to rise again. The town's silence became part of the crime. Everyone in that small Michigan town remembered that winter night. The flashing lights, the police tape, the whispers that traveled faster than the wind. But after a while, the talking stopped. People started avoiding the topic. Stores opened the next day, kids went to school, and slowly, silence replaced the sound of shock. At first, it looked like peace returning, but it wasn't peace, it was fear. People didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to remember. They told themselves, "It's not my problem," or "someone else will figure it out." But when everyone stays silent, truth has nowhere to go. And in that silence, the crime didn't die. It grew roots. Neighbors who might have seen something said nothing. Friends who had doubts stayed quiet. Some did it out of fear, others out of convenience. But their silence built walls around the truth, and those walls took 40 years to break. The real tragedy wasn't just what happened that night, it was what the town allowed to happen after. People think crimes are committed only by the ones who pull the trigger or hold the knife. But sometimes they're also committed by the ones who look away. Because silence can be just as heavy as guilt. It protects the wrong people and leaves the right ones to suffer alone. And when the truth finally came out decades later, the town had to face something even darker than the crime itself, their own reflection. They realized they had lived side by side with evil, not because they didn't see it, but because they chose not to speak. The silence they called safety had become part of the crime. Time turns cowards into witnesses. As the years went by, something strange began to happen. The same people who once stayed quiet started to feel the weight of their silence. They were older now, their faces lined with time, their hearts softer and more honest than they used to be. When you grow old, the things you tried to forget start visiting you at night. You remember the words you didn't say, the faces you avoided, the truth you buried deep inside. Back in 1979, many had chosen fear over courage. Some were afraid of the killer, others were afraid of the gossip, and most were afraid of being wrong. They thought staying silent would keep them safe. But safety built on silence doesn't last. It turns into guilt. And guilt, when carried for decades, becomes heavier than any punishment. So when the case was reopened, and the police began asking questions again, something shifted. Old neighbors picked up the phone. Former co-workers came forward. Even those who had convinced themselves they didn't know much suddenly remembered details they had pushed away for years. It was as if time itself had turned their fear into confession. That's what time does. It changes people. It takes away the arrogance of youth, the pride that once said, "Not my problem." When people realize they're closer to the end than the beginning, they start wanting peace, not protection. They want their conscience clean. They want their truth heard. And so, decades later, voices that once stayed quiet became the very reason justice finally woke up. Cowards became witnesses. Silence became speech. Because no one can run forever, not from time, and not from the truth that grows louder with every passing year. Some souls wait decades to be heard. For more than 40 years, her name was barely spoken. It faded from news headlines, from conversations, even from the memories of those who once promised to never forget. But a soul like hers doesn't disappear. It waits. Somewhere between the silence of the town and the dust of old files, her story lingered, asking for someone to listen again. Her family felt that weight every day, every birthday that came without her, every holiday that ended with one empty chair. It all spoke louder than words. They prayed for closure, but what they really wanted was for her voice to return, for someone, somewhere, to say her name again, to remember she existed beyond tragedy. And then, decades later, it happened. Her photo appeared on screens again. Her story was retold. Her name echoed through a courtroom filled with people who weren't even alive when she was taken. It was as if time itself had stopped to let her speak one last time. The town listened differently now, not with curiosity, but with guilt. They realized that while they went on living, her story had stayed trapped in that winter night. Every word spoken in court wasn't just evidence, it was resurrection. Every truth revealed was like giving her breath again. Some souls don't rest until they're remembered. They linger in the air, waiting for justice to open its eyes. And when that moment finally comes, when their name is spoken, when their truth is told, the silence breaks and their soul can finally exhale. Because even after death, being forgotten is the deepest kind of pain, and being remembered, that's the beginning of peace. Closure isn't death's celebration, it's death's release. When the arrest was finally made, people expected relief, maybe even joy. But what filled the courtroom wasn't celebration, it was silence. A heavy, trembling kind of silence that came from years of waiting, grieving, and wondering if this day would ever come. The family didn't cheer when they saw him in handcuffs. They cried, not because justice had won, but because the pain had finally been acknowledged. Closure is often misunderstood. People think it means the pain disappears, that everything goes back to normal. But closure isn't the end of the story, it's the end of the search. It's the moment when the heart finally stops asking questions it will never get answers to. It's not joy, it's a deep sigh after years of holding your breath. For the family, closure meant being able to visit her grave and say, "It's over now." It meant no longer having to picture her last moments every night before sleep. It meant that after decades of uncertainty, they finally knew what happened, even if knowing hurt just as much as not knowing once did. The detectives who worked the case also felt it. Some had spent half their careers chasing this truth, refusing to let it die, and when the case closed, they didn't celebrate either. They sat quietly at their desks, staring at the old photos one last time, because closure doesn't erase the pain, it just allows you to stop carrying it. That's what true closure is. Not happiness, not victory, but release. It's the heart finally letting go of the rope it's been pulling for years. It's not about forgetting what happened, but about learning how to live again without needing to chase it. Closure doesn't end grief, it just gives it somewhere to rest. Evil forgets. Families don't it. He went on with his life as if nothing had ever happened. He built a routine, made friends, smiled in photographs, and celebrated birthdays. For him, time became a shield, a way to distance himself from the past. That's what evil does. It forgets. It convinces itself that silence is forgiveness, and that the absence of punishment means freedom. But while the guilty man learned to live again, the family he destroyed could never escape the day he created. For them, time didn't move forward, it moved in circles. Every year when that same date came around, it reopened the wound. Every familiar sound, every passing winter breeze reminded them of what was taken. They didn't just lose a loved one, they lost peace. They carried that pain into every season, every new year, every quiet night. They watched as the world forgot her name, but they couldn't. She was part of their breath, their prayers, their silence at dinner tables. They had to live with questions that didn't have answers. They wondered where she would have been if she'd lived, who she would have married, what dreams she would have chased. Evil forgets because it wants to move on. Families remember because they can't. And when the arrest finally came, people were shocked, but the family wasn't. They had always known something was missing from the story. They had always felt that shadow watching from somewhere close. For them, justice wasn't a surprise. It was a reunion with truth. That's the difference between evil and love. Evil buries what it fears to face. Love carries it, year after year, until the truth is forced to rise. The man thought his secret had vanished with time, but love has a longer memory than guilt ever will. Justice arrives like winter. quiet, relentless, and cold. Justice didn't come with noise or applause. It came like the first snowfall, silent, slow, and impossible to stop once it began. For decades it had moved quietly, building strength beneath the surface, unnoticed by those who thought the case was dead. And then, without warning, it fell, covering everything, freezing the lies and revealing the truth buried underneath. The arrest wasn't dramatic. There were no bright lights or shouting cameras, just the sound of footsteps on an old porch and the soft click of handcuffs. But in that quiet moment, the weight of 45 years collapsed all at once. It was cold, final, and strangely calm. The kind of calm that comes when something sacred has been set right. Justice doesn't rush. It moves at the speed of truth. It doesn't care about excuses or the years that have passed. It waits until every piece is in place. And when it comes like winter, steady, emotionless, complete. It freezes every lie that tried to survive, every story that was twisted to protect the guilty. For the family, it wasn't triumph they felt. It was stillness. The same kind of stillness that comes after a storm has finally ended. For the town, it was the same. No cheers, no joy, just quiet faces watching the snow fall outside the courthouse, realizing that justice isn't warm. It doesn't comfort. It chills you with its honesty. Because real justice doesn't arrive with mercy. It arrives with truth. It doesn't melt away the pain. It locks it in memory, reminding everyone that even after decades, the cold hand of justice never loses its grip. It may take years, it may take generations, but it always returns, quiet, relentless, and cold. The past always knows your address. He believed he had outsmarted time. He built a new life in another city, surrounded by people who had no idea who he once was. He grew older, blended into the crowd, paid his bills, smiled at neighbors, and convinced himself that his secret was buried deeper than memory. For decades, he managed to pretend that 1979 was just another year, but the truth doesn't stay buried. It lingers. The past doesn't get lost. It waits patiently, tracing every step you take, learning every address you move to, whispering your name when you think you've been forgotten. Every time he looked over his shoulder, he expected to see someone. Every time the phone rang late at night, his heart skipped a beat. Every knock on the door felt heavier than the last. He smiled in public, but his hands trembled when he was alone. That's how guilt lives. Not loudly, but quietly, like a shadow that never sleeps. He told himself he was safe, that the case was too old, that everyone had stopped caring. But deep down, he knew better. He knew the past has perfect memory, and it never lets go. Over the years, the world changed around him. New faces replaced old ones. New technology brought new ways to find what once was hidden. For a long time, he believed the silence was protection, but it was actually the calm before the storm. As DNA evolved, as detectives revisited old evidence, the noose began to tighten, not physically but in fate. The walls of time were closing in, inch by inch, without him realizing it. And then, one ordinary morning, it happened. A knock on the door, the sound he had feared for half a lifetime. It wasn't loud, but it carried 45 years of truth behind it. He opened it slowly, already knowing what he would see. The badge, the eyes that didn't need to explain, the past standing on his doorstep. He didn't fight. He didn't ask why. Because when the past finally arrives, it doesn't need an introduction. That day, the street was quiet. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as the man they thought they knew was led away in silence. The same house that once gave him comfort became the scene of his undoing. The past had found its way home, as it always does. Because no matter how far you go, no matter how much time you buy, truth never loses your scent. You can move cities, change names, build new walls, but the past always knows your address. It doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. It waits until the day you finally have to open the door and face what you thought you'd escaped forever. For 45 years, the wind carried her name through the streets of that quiet Michigan town, softly, almost like a ghost, whispering a story no one wanted to hear. People built new lives, new memories, new families, but she stayed frozen in 1979, waiting for someone to care again, for someone to look past the silence and see the truth buried beneath it. The town thought it had moved on, but the dead never really leave when their story is unfinished. They linger, not to haunt, but to be heard. Every unanswered question, every unsolved detail became a voice echoing through time. And when the truth finally broke free, it wasn't just an investigation being reopened. It was her voice rising from the dark, asking the living to finally listen. Justice didn't bring her back. It didn't erase the pain or fill the empty chairs left behind, but it gave her story an ending, the kind she had been waiting decades for, because when truth is finally spoken, even the dead can rest. The people of that town learned something that day, that silence doesn't protect you, it punishes you, that the past never dies quietly, that the truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way to speak. And maybe that's what this story was always about. Not revenge, not closure, but remembrance, because some souls cannot sleep until their name is spoken one last time, not in fear but in peace. The dead wait for the living to listen, and when we finally do, the silence ends and justice breathes again.